On the day of the wedding, my girlfriend chose her ideal partner and left me. I became the subject of everyone's discussions. However, she seemed completely indifferent, thinking that the wedding could be held at any time. My youth is only once, and it cannot be wasted. Later, when I walked into the wedding hall with the daughter of the local tycoon, she begged me not to leave. I raised the marriage certificate in my hand. Youth is precious, don't waste it easily. Cece, can you please not leave? I specifically wore a custom-made suit today, holding Evangeline Hart's hand tightly, with a pleading expression on my face. Evangeline, dressed in a pure white wedding gown, stood there looking very impatient. Callum Reed, how long do you intend to cause a fuss? I've already said that Lucian Hale needs me right now. But this is our wedding. I keep stressing that I hope she can change her mind. Just then, her phone rang. After Evangeline answered the phone, her expression immediately turned anxious. Okay. I'll be there right away. I hung up and saw Evangeline break free from my grip. She quickly grabbed a nearby dinner knife and cut the hem of her wedding dress. Lucian is injured, I have to go find her. I wanted to say something, but Evangeline turned and walked away without hesitation. As I watched her retreating figure, my heart felt as if it were being torn apart. Lucian. It was Lucian again. I knew Evangeline cared a lot about him, but I never expected that on our wedding day, she would choose him without a second thought. The guests in the audience were also perplexed by this sudden turn of events. As they watched the female lead leave, discussions began to arise among them. I never expected that the wedding I had carefully prepared would be ruined by Lucian in this way. He didn't even show up himself, it was all based on a phone call and an uncertain piece of information. I took a deep breath and slowly relaxed my tightly clenched fists. She won. The marriage between the Hart family and the Reed family may not have been particularly eye-catching, but almost all the local elites were present, along with quite a few reporters conducting interviews. As I watched people whispering to each other, I realized that if nothing unexpected happened, I might become the laughingstock of the entire district by tomorrow. However, what worried me even more at that moment was the potential damage to the Reed family's reputation if this matter got out. Would it affect their business and the stock market? Just when I was feeling helpless, someone suddenly walked onto the stage. Before I could see clearly, his gentle voice whispered in my ear, "If you're willing, I can help you." As he drew closer, I caught a whiff of an orchid fragrance. I looked up and met his clear eyes. She was Serafina Blake. She suddenly said something that shocked me, "Our Blake family is quite powerful, why don't we temporarily switch engagement partners?" I glanced at her in surprise, and she turned to face me, her expression quite serious. I have to admit, her eyes are truly beautiful, resembling alluring peach blossom eyes. From her gaze, I couldn't tell if she was joking. "Are you serious?" I was somewhat confused. Serafina smiled gently, clapped her hands, and several women immediately stepped forward to help her adjust the long train of her dress. In less than 3 minutes, her outfit transformed into a magnificent wedding gown. I felt even more astonished and a bit moved, but there was also an unease within me. I spoke up, "Actually, you don't have to do this, she doesn't really care." I moved closer to her, and she whispered in my ear, "You just need to tell me, are you willing?" She took a step back, her gaze steady. Perhaps it was Evangeline's sudden departure that left me feeling a bit unsettled, or maybe I was drawn to Serafina standing before me. Strangely enough, I found myself agreeing to this unreasonable request. "All right." Serafina smiled gently. The wedding proceeded as usual, everything went according to my plan. It was just that the bride had been replaced by someone else. I carried out the entire ceremony as per the schedule. After the wedding concluded, the reporters couldn't wait to rush forward with their questions. "Mr. Reed, what's going on? Is your fiancée actually a member of the Hart family or is she Miss Blake? Why did Miss Hart suddenly leave?" I looked displeased and struggled to handle the situation. Just then, Serafina stepped forward again. She said, "You may have misunderstood, the true protagonists of this wedding are actually the Blake family and the Reed family. It started out as just a small event." Although this explanation seemed somewhat forced, Serafina's attitude was very firm. It appeared that the truth was just as she claimed. The journalists, despite their reluctance, had no choice but to give up in the face of the Blake family's strong stance. After the guests had left, I watched Serafina conversing amiably with the relatives on my side, as my rationality slowly returned. What have I done? How could I agree to such an absurd suggestion? What will I do now? Serafina approached me, her eyes reflecting a complex mix of emotions. Am I daydreaming? Feeling a bit uneasy under her gaze, I scratched my head. It really did seem strange, it was just a rescue, yet I wanted to mention how exceptional her performance was. It felt as if it had all been planned in advance. Serafina covered her mouth and chuckled, saying, "Callum, when I suggested you find another wedding partner, I wasn't joking." I stared at her in shock, thinking that she just wanted to help me. She waved her hand dismissively and said she wasn't that kind-hearted, she just felt the timing was right. Then, she suddenly leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "Callum, why haven't you been willing to look back at me all these years?" I looked up and saw the glimmer of tears in her eyes, and I couldn't help but ask, "Do you like me?" The words slipped out before I even realized it, and I was surprised myself. After all, I have grown up together with her and Evangeline since childhood. Serafina has always had a quiet personality, so I've always regarded her as my neighbor's little sister. You really are a bit slow, it took you this long to notice. Serafina bit her lip, looking somewhat enchanting. I felt a bit hesitant, unsure of what to say. Everything that had happened today was completely beyond my understanding. I was somewhat dazed. Serafina, with a hint of disappointment in her eyes, quickly smiled and patted my shoulder. She joked that it was just a ceremony, merely a formality. As long as we can get through this with the media, everyone will forget in due time. I let out a sigh of relief, although I felt a bit guilty. I had to admit that this was the best solution for now. Thank you. Serafina waved her hand and quickly left. That night when I got home, I lay in bed, unable to sleep at all. Whenever I think of Evangeline, I can't help but feel a deep sadness. We have known each other since we were kids, and that first love feeling is truly unforgettable. After graduating high school, I was almost always by her side. Although she never accepted my feelings for her, she also never explicitly rejected me. I always believed that there were emotions between us, she just might have been too shy to express them. Until Lucian appeared, he seemed to possess a certain charm. I was deeply in love with Evangeline, and Evangeline was also deeply in love with Lucian. They met during college, so Lucian was unaware of Evangeline's complicated family background. Their relationship was like that of other couples in love at university, happy and beautiful. At that time, I felt somewhat disheartened. I initially thought that Evangeline and I would smoothly be together, but unexpected events occurred. As the sole heir of the Reed family, I would never interfere in someone else's relationship. I genuinely wished them well. However, I was surprised when, after graduating from college, Lucian started dating a foreign girlfriend, claiming that she could take him to live abroad. As for Evangeline, he only called her to say that he felt they weren't suitable for each other, and that was the end of it. During that time, Evangeline was very upset and spent her days drinking at the bar to drown her sorrows. I have always been by her side, taking care of her. Later, I heard that Lucian was not doing well abroad, and that the foreign girl he was with broke up with him not long after they got together. However, he somehow found out that Evangeline was the daughter of Hart Corporation, and he took the initiative to come back and look for her. After returning to the country, he started using various methods to get closer to Evangeline. Although Evangeline seemed impatient, I knew that she could never truly let go of her feelings for him. Lucian is the kind of man who would give up everything for wealth and luxury. However, Evangeline is drawn to him just the way he is. In the end, both families decided on a marriage alliance, and Evangeline agreed. That night, I was so excited that I could hardly sleep. After years of yearning, my dreams had finally come true, but I never expected it to turn out this way. Ding dong, my phone buzzed, and I saw that Evangeline had posted on Moments. In the photo, she and Lucian were tightly embracing each other. The caption read, "Long live youth, long live freedom. No matter what it costs, I am completely willing." Upon seeing her post, my previously restless mood instantly calmed down. I picked up my phone and called Evangeline. No one answered the first time. When I called again, I finally got through. After the call connected, I heard Evangeline's breathless voice. "What are you doing?" I asked her casually. "Callum is taking me for a night run, I don't have time to chat, so I'll hang up now." After the call ended, I felt even calmer. I picked up my phone and deleted all her contact information. She let out a sigh of relief, extinguished her cigarette, and then simply laid down to sleep. I had a particularly deep sleep and did not wake up until shortly after noon, when I was jolted awake by a series of urgent knocks on the door. I sat up, rubbed my somewhat dazed head, and slowly opened the door. Standing outside were Evangeline and her first love, Lucian. As soon as she saw me, Evangeline angrily demanded, "Callum, what's going on? Why did you block me? Did you do something by locking the door?" Lucian beside me looked at me with disdain in his eyes. I couldn't help but sneer internally, surprised by her counterattack. I took a deep breath and said calmly, "Evangeline, let's break up." Evangeline was stunned, as if she had heard something unbelievable. Her eyes widened, and it took her a moment to react. "Callum, what's wrong with you? We just got married yesterday, and today you want to break up with me? It's just a wedding, I can always hold another one." I stared blankly at the woman I once loved. "I'll say it again, we are breaking up, Evangeline. You can have your wedding with your first love. She wants freedom, so I'll let her go." Judging by her attitude, she might not even know what happened after yesterday's wedding. Even if she does know, it seems she doesn't care. After hearing what I said, Evangeline was taken aback for a moment, and then her emotions became quite agitated. "Callum, don't forget who proposed to me in the first place. Now you're telling me you want to break up? Who do you think you are? You think you can just decide to break up or stay together whenever you want? Today, no matter what, you have to give me an explanation." After saying that, I slammed the door shut. Evangeline was kicking and banging on the door in frustration. I decided to put on my headphones and listen to some rock music. After a while, the noise outside gradually faded, so I took off the headphones. Outside, faint sounds of crying could be heard, along with Lucian pretending to comfort her. "Evangeline, I've told you before that you two are not suitable for each other. Callum is not a trustworthy person. A selfish person like him cannot have a good outcome. Come on, it's been a long day, why don't we go to my place and rest for a bit?" Hearing the conversation between the two outside the door, I couldn't help but chuckle. Is this what Evangeline refers to as just friends? I remember the first time she left me was on the night of our engagement. I had prepared a lavish dinner and waited the whole evening until the food went cold, and only then did Evangeline return home, exhausted. When I asked her about it, she angrily accused me of being overly sensitive, insisting that her relationship with Callum was over and that they were now just friends. I was left speechless by what she said, and since I had always held a certain fondness for her, I could only helplessly give up. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was at the time. Believing that there could be pure friendship between men and women is as unrealistic as thinking the moon is square. I am determined that, no matter what happens between Evangeline and Lucian, I will have no further connection with her. When it comes to infidelity, it either doesn't happen at all or it occurs multiple times. Those who have tasted the forbidden fruit find it hard to return to their previous lives. To avoid affecting both parties' business, I discussed this matter with my parents in advance. My father was very angry. He slammed the table and warned me to be more cautious when looking for a girlfriend in the future. Early the next morning, I received a call from Serafina. Seeing that familiar number, I felt a bit at a loss. I didn't know how to face her. To be honest, I felt more touched and grateful. If she hadn't stepped up to help me that day, I would probably be looking at news about the young master of the Reed family being abandoned at the wedding by now. However, regarding her words and attitude at the wedding, I'm not sure how to respond. I stared at the flickering phone screen until it went dark, yet I still couldn't make up my mind. Perhaps I was a little scared. I felt that it would be better to remain silent for a while. After some time, this matter would lose its attention. Then I could have a good chat with Serafina. That's how I thought to myself. Before long, there was a knock at the door. I was a bit puzzled, thinking it was Evangeline returning, but when I opened the door, I found Serafina standing outside. She wore a sweet smile, and when she saw me, she raised an eyebrow slightly. She asked why I hadn't answered her calls. Her tone was casual, with no hint of blame. It felt like talking about an ordinary matter. I was a bit nervous, scratching my head and coming up with an excuse. Serafina didn't say anything. Her gaze slid past the tightly clenched phone in my hand, and the smile on her face grew wider. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked. I quickly stepped aside to let her in. "Ah, please come in." Serafina walked into the room with grace. As we brushed past each other, a familiar fragrance of orchids wafted by, and I couldn't help but take a gentle sniff. It smelled wonderful. However, I quickly realized that this might not be appropriate, and I awkwardly touched my nose. Serafina didn't seem to notice as she walked over to the sofa in the living room and sat down. Seeing me awkwardly standing nearby, she patted the seat next to her, inviting me to join her. I hesitated for a moment, and she squinted her eyes and smiled. "I really didn't expect you to be shy too." I felt a bit embarrassed and scratched my head with a silly smile. She shook her head. "I'm not joking this time. I have something important to discuss with you." As she spoke, she took out a document from her pocket. "Take a look at this, and if everything is fine, please sign it." Confused, I walked over, picked up the document from the table, glanced at it, and was instantly taken aback. Is it a disguise agreement for a boyfriend? What is going on? Serafina seemed to have anticipated my reaction. She crossed her legs and hugged her knees, saying, "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend, or you could be my contract husband. In return, I will give you 5% of Blake Enterprises stock." I felt even more confused, with my mind racing. Why would she want to go through such troublesome things? Could it be that she... Other thoughts involuntarily crossed my mind. Seeing my expression, Serafina's smile grew even more pronounced. "Don't think too much, I just need someone to deal with my elders at home. Moreover, collaborating with me would also benefit Hart Corporation, making it a win-win situation, wouldn't you agree?" I thought it over seriously. It does seem to be the case. Yesterday, I held a wedding with her in front of the media, and now it appears to the outside world that the Reed family and the Blake family are closely connected. This doesn't seem to pose any issues. Moreover, I happen to need help getting rid of Evangeline. What? Are you afraid of me, a delicate woman, despite being such a big man? Seeing my hesitation, Serafina leaned forward slightly, her tone teasing. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Sure, I agree to your request." "So, what is your purpose?" "I'm quite curious." "No one is nice to you for no reason, unless they have other motives." Serafina put away her smile, looked up at the sky, and after thinking for a moment, she lowered her head to meet my gaze and softly said, "Maybe it's because I like you." I almost choked on my saliva and couldn't help but roll my eyes at her. This girl is as unreliable as ever. I really don't understand how she can say such outrageous things with a straight face. "I'm serious," Serafina insisted again. I didn't want to get into an argument with her, so I waved my hand dismissively. "Sure, I understand." Before she had a chance to speak, I picked up the agreement. She had prepared everything very thoroughly, almost like signing a company contract. I signed without hesitation because I still had a strong trust in this friend I had known since childhood. As Serafina took the agreement and left, I increasingly felt a sense of estrangement from this childhood playmate. I knew that once the news spread, Evangeline would definitely be very upset. A couple of days later, both the Reed family and the Blake family held press conferences at the same time to announce their marriage alliance. It was at that moment that Evangeline finally realized what was going on. When Serafina came to visit me, Evangeline stormed in angrily. As soon as she saw me, she walked straight toward me, her eyes filled with grievance. "Callum, what are you doing? The rumors outside are all false, right? I am your fiancée. I admit I was wrong to leave you at the wedding, can you forgive me?" I raised an eyebrow, a bit surprised. After all these years of knowing each other, she actually took the initiative to admit her mistake for the first time. Despite her carefully applied makeup, the fatigue on her face was obvious, with dark circles clearly visible. It seemed she didn't have a good night last night. But what does that have to do with me? I gently pushed her away, looked into her expectant eyes, and said lightly, "I accept your apology." "Really?" Evangeline asked with surprise. "Of course," I replied with a slight smile. "We no longer have any relationship, so it doesn't really matter whether there's forgiveness or an apology." Evangeline was taken aback, her eyes quickly filling with tears. "Do you still refuse to forgive me?" I looked at her coldly, feeling not a trace of emotion. "Isn't this the freedom you've always wanted? From now on, you can be open with Lucian without having to hide, isn't that a good thing?" Evangeline's eyes instantly turned red, not from sadness, but from anger. I had already said that he only gets depressed occasionally, I was just taking care of him, and nothing had happened. Besides, we can hold the wedding anytime, people's lives are at stake. I looked at her deeply and shook my head in disdain. For the first time, I felt that my feelings over the years were completely unworthy. "Evangeline, don't treat others like fools." I said coldly that I had lost all hope for the woman in front of me. Evangeline wanted to argue, but at that moment, Serafina had quietly come to my side and gently linked her arm with mine. "I'm sorry, Miss Hart," she said. Facing Evangeline's sharp gaze, Serafina showed no fear and met her eyes with calmness. "If you have something to say to my husband, you can say it to me as well." After all, she paused for a moment, her smile deepening. "My husband doesn't seem to want to engage with you any further." Evangeline's expression grew even darker. "Who gave you the right to call him husband? You're only married in name." It seems that Evangeline is not simple either. From the live broadcast of the event, it can be seen that Serafina stepped forward just to help me out of a tough situation. Serafina is leaning in closer, as if to imply her stance. "We have already held our wedding, so how can we not be considered a couple?" However, she is smiling happily. "I also have to thank you, if it weren't for your last-minute retreat for that little one, I wouldn't have had this opportunity at all. In the end, I have to thank you for your help. You." Evangeline was so angry that her whole body trembled, and I couldn't help but laugh beside her. I didn't expect this usually quiet girl to have such a sharp side when she spoke. It seemed that my smile provoked her, as her eyes suddenly narrowed, and she fixed her gaze intently on me. "Callum, are you serious?" I put away my smile as I noticed the looks from Serafina beside me and Evangeline in front of me. "Yes, it's true, I really married Serafina." Evangeline's expression instantly fell apart, and she seemed a bit out of control. "How could you marry her? I am your fiancé. Have you forgotten our relationship?" She tried to use our engagement to put pressure on me. I smiled and gently patted Serafina's hand, which was tightly gripping my arm. "This girl doesn't seem as relaxed as she appears." Serafina looked at me with a hint of worry in her eyes. I gave her a reassuring glance. Since I had already decided to let go, I would never turn back. "An agreement? What agreement? Do we have a marriage engagement? Are we engaged?" Evangeline was about to say yes, but suddenly seemed to remember something and stopped. I looked at her, filled with irony. I had deliberately asked that question. Due to our engagement, Evangeline was not present. She looked at me carefully, as if trying to find a trace of regret on my face. But she would be disappointed. Callum, please don't be like this. I know I may not have done enough, but can we really just throw away our feelings after so many years? She started to soften her attitude, trying to get closer to me, but I didn't feel moved. Looking back now, I really should have woken up to the reality sooner. She chose to leave me time and again to pursue others, and I should have realized my situation long ago. In this relationship, I was destined to fail. Evangeline, stop this already. Serafina said coldly, her face losing all trace of a smile. Don't interrupt. Evangeline snapped, clearly angry. I'm speaking to my fiancée, and it's none of your business. I stopped Serafina, who was about to say something more, and gently took her hand, our fingers intertwining. She is my wife, Miss Hart, so please be cautious when speaking to her. As a man, I certainly can't always hide behind a woman. Evangeline seemed enraged and shouted loudly at both of us, all right, I see you've been getting cozy with each other all along. Callum, I really misjudged you, you'd better not regret this. With that, Evangeline hurried away. She understood that staying any longer would only make her more awkward. Her pride wouldn't allow her to be the one who made a mistake, especially since they were supposed to get married just 2 days ago. Now, she found herself defending another woman. This feeling of disconnection was hard for her to accept. As I stood there, dazed and staring in the direction Evangeline had left, Serafina squeezed my hand and, a bit jealously, said, "What are you looking at? They're already gone." I shook my head and gave her an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect her to say that." Serafina casually waved her hand. "Those who are innocent will remain innocent, no matter what others think of her actions, I wouldn't care." I nodded in agreement. Serafina noticed that I was feeling down and gave me a meaningful glance before tentatively saying, "It's okay, I understand. After all, you've had so many years of affection, it's normal for it to be hard to let go right away." I forced a bitter smile. Unrequited love can't be considered real emotion. After all these years of feelings, I finally realized that it was just my own obsession. I no longer care. No matter what Evangeline is like, it doesn't affect my mood, which lets me know that I've moved on. Serafina let out a sigh of relief, turned, and walked into the house, taking out an exquisite gift bag from her bag. "This is for you," she said. I opened it to find a small jewelry box inside. Serafina smiled at me, but her flushed ears betrayed her true feelings. I felt a jolt in my heart, the woman's blush surpassed all the love words in the world. Wasn't this the moment I had always been waiting for? Looking at the jewelry box in my hands, I suddenly felt a bit anxious. "Why are you in a daze? Hurry up and open it," Serafina urged. I opened the jewelry box in a daze, and inside were 2 exquisite diamond rings. I felt really surprised. Serafina wrinkled her nose and said helplessly, "Honestly, some people act like fools all day long, making me take a few extra steps." As she spoke, she handed the rings to me. "Go ahead and try it on, see if it fits," I said. As I looked at the ring in my hand, I couldn't help but feel a wave of emotion. I had actually prepared wedding rings for Evangeline and me before, but after she turned away that day, I threw those rings away. I never expected that now, while trying to suppress my feelings, I still couldn't help but remind her, "Remember, we are just a couple under a contract?" Although my heart was already full of hope, I knew I couldn't show it. I'm afraid that in the end, I might face failure again. Is this really necessary? We are just playing along with each other, so why put in so much effort? I let out a light laugh. Serafina's smile suddenly faded, and her eyes appeared slightly red. She sniffed slightly, her voice sounding somewhat aggrieved. "Marriage is not a trivial matter, even if it's just a formality, I hope to treat it seriously." She looked at me earnestly, and I felt a jolt in my heart. Suddenly, I felt a sting in my nose. I realized that this girl in front of me didn't seem to be joking at all. Her feelings for me weren't just a passing whim. Although she jokingly said so at the wedding, I now realized she was serious. I thought that once I talked things over with Evangeline, she would understand the reality of the situation. But I underestimated her. As I reached the door after work, ready to open it, Evangeline suddenly appeared. I looked at her, feeling somewhat helpless. "Miss Hart, is my meaning not clear enough?" Evangeline was staring at me, but she didn't say a word. I didn't want to linger any longer, I just wanted to get inside as soon as possible. Just as I was about to open the door, she suddenly stood up and threw herself into my arms. Before I could react, she lifted her head and kissed my lips. A strong smell of alcohol wafted over. I was taken aback, and once I regained my senses, I immediately pushed her away and wiped my lips with some displeasure. "Miss Hart, such behavior is truly hard to accept." Evangeline's eyes were reddened, and she bit her lip tightly. "Callum, do you really not love me anymore? I have made it clear to Lucian that we will no longer be together. Can you forgive me?" She continued speaking to herself. "We can plan another wedding since I found out that you and Serafina haven't registered your marriage yet. Can we get back together?" I looked at her, feeling a bit complicated. At the time, I had also considered it. I thought that as long as she apologized to me, I would be able to forgive her. But she never apologized. It's too late to say it now. Compared to feelings of being moved or changing one's mind, what predominates is a sense of indifference. Even now, she still doesn't understand where she went wrong. She even thinks that organizing a second wedding will make amends. She has always firmly believed that I cannot live without her. From the very beginning, our relationship has been unequal. In this relationship, I have always been the one who compromises and gives. I don't need this kind of relationship, Miss Hart. I said softly, my tone calm. I've already mentioned that I have a fiancée, and we have held a wedding, there's no need to bring up the past again. Since we have already parted ways, I hope we can separate amicably. Don't entangle with each other anymore. Evangeline stood still, tears streaming down her cheeks, her lips trembling as she looked at me with disbelief in her eyes. "Callum, are you really this resolute?" I didn't answer. Deep down, she knew who was truly heartless. She just didn't want to admit it. "Callum," Evangeline wanted to say something more, but at that moment, her phone rang. When she saw the caller ID, her expression changed immediately, and she hung up the phone. However, it seemed that the caller was unwilling to give up. Evangeline gave me an apologetic smile and then answered the call. "I thought I told you not to call me?" "What?" I'm coming right away." I couldn't hear what was said on the other end of the line, but Evangeline's expression suddenly turned anxious. After hanging up, she hesitated for a moment before speaking to me. "Lucian chose to commit suicide," and I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. My tone was very flat. It seemed as if this matter had nothing to do with me. Evangeline bit her lip. "Don't worry, this will definitely be the last time. I will make sure someone takes good care of him, and after that, I won't have any more contact with him, I promise." After Evangeline finished speaking, she hurriedly left. I didn't respond, or rather, I didn't care. As I mentioned before, it had nothing to do with me. I went to Serafina's house to visit her parents. Although we grew up together and our families were quite familiar with each other, this was still a significant occasion. The wedding came a bit unexpectedly, so it was necessary to prepare both sets of parents mentally. I prepared the gift early in the morning and went straight to Serafina's house. This girl has helped me a lot, and I must show my gratitude to her. As I approached her doorstep, I saw her waiting for me from a distance. When she spotted me, Serafina's eyes lit up, and she quickly ran over to me, linking her arm with mine. I raised my eyebrow, thinking to myself that this would incur an additional charge. Serafina shot me a glare, looking somewhat serious. "Let's start with 200. While we chatted and joked, we didn't notice that Blake's parents were standing at the door, smiling and watching us. After entering the house, they were very warm and welcoming. "Callum, you really are a good boy. Did you not know? Our Serafina has liked you since she was little," Serafina's mother said as she chatted away. "I originally heard that you were going to marry that girl from the Hart family, and I was even planning to have Serafina go on a blind date. I didn't expect that you both would end up together after all." Serafina's father kept nodding in agreement beside us and occasionally praised me. Although I believe I have a thick skin, being complimented by them still made me feel a bit shy. Uncle and aunt praised me too much. I really feel lucky to be with Serafina. She leaned against me, her cheeks slightly flushed, but she kept holding onto my arm. "Hee, we're getting older and just hope that our children can be happy and healthy." The meal was abundant and delicious, and the Blake family parents were warm and welcoming, showing no signs of impatience. It was clear that the two elders truly support our marriage. After dinner, I pulled Serafina aside. I asked her, "Have you really liked me for a long time?" Serafina's cheeks flushed slightly. She replied, "Yeah, what's up? Is there a problem?" I shook my head. "Of course not, it's just that after this visit with your parents, our agreement will be coming to an end." I teased her on purpose. Serafina was taken aback for a moment, biting her lip. "Do you really not like me at all?" Her eyes were filled with tears, and her voice trembled. "Why won't you even look at me after all this time?" Seeing her on the verge of tears made me a little anxious, and I quickly tried to comfort her. "I was just kidding," she responded to me with skepticism. "Really?" I gently tapped her nose. "I'm so happy to have such a beautiful wife, especially since she also earns money. It's truly a wonderful thing." Serafina laughed and hugged me tightly. I embraced her back. In that moment, I finally let go. One should look forward and not let a single setback negate everything. Although we have already had a wedding, it wasn't meant for both of us. My parents insisted on holding another ceremony. They didn't want Serafina to feel wronged. Of course, I agreed. Once the venue was ready, it was time for the wedding dress. The moment the curtain was lifted, I was amazed. I had imagined how Serafina would look in a wedding dress. But the moment I actually saw her, I was truly amazed. "Do you like it?" Her eyes sparkled, as if they were shining. "I do like it, very much." I nodded vigorously. She smiled and stepped forward, gently holding me in an embrace. She whispered in my ear, "Do you know? I have waited for this day for over 20 years. Callum, I love you." Her voice trembled slightly, and I could clearly feel warm tears sliding down my neck. I didn't say anything, I just held her tighter. The wedding took place as scheduled. After the officiant finished the blessing, I walked up to the stage, looking forward to the floral arch, waiting for my wife to appear. To my surprise, Evangeline showed up. She was dressed elegantly, wearing the wedding gown from our previous ceremony, and it looked like it had been specially repaired. Under the gaze of the crowd, Evangeline slowly walked onto the stage and came to stand in front of me. I felt indifferent, and my patience was wearing thin. She said, "Callum, I was wrong. I've neglected you all along. You once said that the thing you looked forward to the most was seeing me in a wedding dress, marrying you. Now I'm here. Can we have a fresh start?" Evangeline took out a ring, and I recognized it as identical to the one I had customized earlier. "Give me a chance to make it right, okay?" I stood there, looking at her calmly, with no emotions stirring within me, and finally shook my head. "If you leave now, you can still maintain a bit of dignity." Outside the archway, the real bride appeared. A faint smile appeared on my lips. I stepped past Evangeline and walked decisively towards Serafina, gently pulling her into my embrace and kissing her deeply. Evangeline froze, her gaze fixed on us, her body slightly trembling, and then she helplessly sank to the ground. When the Hart family parents arrived, they looked displeased and took her away. This small incident did not disrupt the continuation of the wedding. The moment the ring was placed on Serafina's ring finger, tears shimmered in her eyes. The officiant then asked, "Mr. Callum, do you take Miss Serafina as your wife and promise to love her forever?" I smiled softly, stepped forward, and gently embraced her. "I do."